Welcome. This is Richard Silverman reporting. I've just completed an interview with Clayton W. Wentworth from Australia, historian, researcher and the official spokesperson and mentor to the Voice of the World and the Global Fund for Peace, Justice and Development. I am still shaking due to the revelations I have just become privy to and the fallout worldwide these revelations will obviously resulting. Let me qualify the following before I go any further. This expose is not supposed to be entertainment, but I believe it to be the most important piece of work ever committed to film. People the world over are completely bewildered, confused and lost for words as to the reason why we have had such a deterioration in world affairs, our economies and way of life. And in particular, why after more than 60 years we have not seen a final and proper resolution of matters between Israel and its neighbours in the Middle East. If, as we are told, Israel wants peace. For Israeli atrocities against Palestinians, you should Google Deir Yassin, 9th of April 1948, Sabra and Shatila, 16th of September 1982, and Jenin and Nablus, 2nd of May 2002. The events of the past 11 years in particular can be likened to a huge jigsaw puzzle that people have been unable to successfully assemble and complete. This expose will do this for you. The ramifications and fallout from these revelations will affect every man, woman and child the world over. It will change the political landscape in the US, the UK and Australia forever. It will affect every aspect of your life, including who governs these countries in particular. The effects upon your future economic well-being, including your job prospects, your ability to secure a loan for your home, the interest rate you pay, the price of fuel worldwide, the price of food, the price of travel, and virtually every other aspect of life for hundreds of millions around the world will be profound. And by profound, I mean for the better. Without further ado, let me take you to the interview. Welcome, Mr. Wentworth.
Thank you.
As the world's foremost authority on 9/11, Afghanistan and Iraq, where do we start?
The Voice of the World and the Global Fund for Peace, Justice and Development, which I will refer to hereafter as the Global Fund, have just completed the most exhaustive piece of research spanning 11 years. We now have all the evidence we need, including that from whistleblowers from within the US and UK governments, staff currently serving and former members of the CIA, FBI and current and former members of the US and UK military to establish the following facts and conclusions. The revelations and facts I refer to hereafter need to be viewed firstly in the context of the following qualifications and determinations. The Global Fund and the Voice of the World have already established incontrovertibly and without any misunderstanding whatsoever, prior to this release date and prior to the assassination of Osama bin Laden, the following facts. Osama bin Laden had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the events of the 11th September 2001, 9/11. The evidence and the facts which would have us arrive at this conclusion are incontrovertible and are not open to supposition, argument or speculation whatsoever. Not only is there not a single skerrick of evidence of Osama bin Laden's involvement in 9/11, there is a mountain of evidence to prove he was framed for the event, and as a consequence he had nothing at all to do with it. And further to the above, we now have proof positive that the criminal illegal invasion of Afghanistan in October 2001 and Iraq on the 20th of March 2003 were at no time in response to 9/11, full plans for Afghanistan having been made by Bush & Co. in July 2001, a full 2 months prior to the 9/11 event, as confirmed in the following BBC interview. Please keep in mind that this interview took place on the 18th of September 2001, a week after 9/11 and nearly 3 weeks before the United States attacked Afghanistan.
Yes, it's an absolutely astounding revelation that there was already a detailed American plan to launch a major assault on Afghanistan, which was there and ready to go into operation a good 7 or 8 weeks before the attacks on the World Trade Center. I got this information off a very senior Pakistani, a former Foreign Secretary of Pakistan, Niaz Naik, who's involved in what's called Track 2 diplomacy. He's part of an international contact group, including America, Russia, Iran and Pakistan. And at a meeting in Berlin in July, he and the others were told by senior US officials that planning for an attack on Afghanistan had been finalized.
They indicated to us that in case the Taliban do not behave, and in case Pakistan also doesn't help us to influence the Taliban, then the United States will be left with no option except to take an overt action against Afghanistan.
What sort of action were they talking about?
This is exactly what I asked Ambassador Simon. I said, you tried in 1999 your cruise missiles, but you didn't succeed. But he said that this time we are going to have this overt action from very close vicinity of Afghanistan. I said, what does it mean, Pakistan? He said, no, Tajikistan, we already have the bases, American advisors are over there, the Russian troops, 17,000 are ready over there, Uzbekistan will join it, and all these things. So we have this thing from close proximity.
And was the intention to mount an operation to snatch or kill Osama bin Laden, or did it have a wider objective than that?
A wider objective. First was to kill or to capture Osama bin Laden. Secondly, in the same strikes, to root out all the extremist elements over there like Mullah Umar, some of the other warlords, and try to encourage the moderates from within Afghanistan and those who are outside Afghanistan to rally around a less fundamentalist government. And then in that connection they said that we are now hoping that King Zahir Shah can be brought in as a symbolic head of a transitional or a provisional government which will then prepare the constitution and prepare the new broad-based government of moderates. They kept on using the word moderates.
So you're telling me that 6 weeks or more before the World Trade Center bombings, the Americans already had an evolved plan to topple the Taliban government, Taliban regime in Afghanistan?
I think so. That is what the indications were from the American participants in Berlin, to topple or to destroy or just to replace them with a moderate with King Zahir Shah. And I think they were going to use force to kill or capture both Osama bin Laden and Mullah Umar.
Now, George, we were just hearing there from Niaz Naik, the former Pakistani Foreign Secretary. Given what's happened since those plans were formulated, it would seem that now is the time, from the Americans' point of view, to put them into action.
Yes, well, it seems if there was already such a detailed plan before the World Trade Center bombings, and since the Americans seem so convinced that Osama bin Laden was behind those bombings, that plan will go ahead. And my interpretation is that this revelation from Niaz Naik shows that the Americans are absolutely determined to go ahead with an assault on Afghanistan. They already had done a great deal of planning. What's more, it gives us an indication as to the timing, because Mr. Naik told me that he was told by the American representative, former US Assistant Secretary of State Carl Inderfirth, that the attack would go ahead before the first snows began to fall in Afghanistan. That comes in about the middle of October. In other words, there are only about another couple of weeks until those snows start falling, visibility becomes much less, and if Mr. Naik is right, and if the Americans were telling him the truth at this meeting in Berlin, a major American assault on Afghanistan will begin.
Precisely as indicated in this most critical BBC interview, the Bush-Blair illegal criminal attack on Afghanistan was launched on the 7th of October 2001. Bush refused to provide any evidence whatsoever of who was responsible for 9/11 when requested to do so by the United States Congress, as referred to in Chapter 38A of the Voice of the World Main Chapter Index. Just click on the link in the second column to the right of the chapter number. I quote this extract from the Gore Vidal article on the Voice of the World website at Chapter 96B. Quote, I mean, when we went into Afghanistan to take over the place and blow it up, our commanding general was asked how long it was going to take to find bin Laden. The general looked surprised and said, and I quote, well, that's not why we are here. End of quote. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Any of the most recent claims by President Obama regarding Osama bin Laden are a complete ruse. This will be Obama's undoing and goes to the core reason for this documentary, Unspeakable Evil. The 9/11 5th anniversary 11th September 2006 BBC Radio 4 Today programme 8:30 a.m. interview with Gore Vidal at chapter 462 is particularly revealing and sheds much further light on everything that has happened. Here is an edited version of this most critical, historic and vitally important interview.
Time's 21 minutes to 9. September the 11th has spurned all sorts of conspiracy theories, and some of them are held by very distinguished people, among them no less a figure than the great American novelist Gore Vidal. I spoke to him and asked him how he thought the United States has changed in the 5 years since the attacks.
We have been sown with salt, our republic, by the success of Osama bin Laden or whoever it was who was behind the 9/11 affair. And since then, we have lost the American Republic. I never thought it would go down so quickly with so little fight. Internally, we've lost it. We have not lost it to the foreign terrorist enemy, though that was the trigger, that was the catalyst for losing one by one the Bill of Rights, which I could enumerate, but anybody's there who has a copy of our Constitution, or indeed slightly longer pieces on this subject. One by one, due process of law, which is the basis to the liberties enjoyed once upon a time by the American citizens. That has been subverted by these secret camps around the world, by kidnapping people, holding them to trial, executing them, who knows what has been going on. We were transformed into a police state, and if I were Mr. bin Laden, if he was responsible, and I suspect now he's a bogeyman that we invented along the way, he's endorsed torture. And the vice president, Mr. Cheney, should be just the sadomasochistic vice president, who is totally an affair. He's hysterical on the subject. He's gone to Congress to testify how we need to be able to torture people. No. The victory is all on the sides of these gas and oil people who have seized control of the three branches of the government. It's beautifully done. It was a great coup d'etat. And were there any voices against it? Very, very few. Most people were too busy, looking at our dreadful media, which is collusive in all of this, since they belong to the same people who have produced the oil and gas tyranny. What we have lost, the fallout, has been starting with the homeland security. They already use a word reminiscent of the Third Reich. That's not a normal phrase for Americans to use. Their homeland, I have never heard an American say that spontaneously until it was inflicted upon us by the government. No, we have, one by one, they have grabbed all the centers of power in the United States. And they govern really pretty much by decree now. We have no idea what is going on with the CIA, with the FBI. We have no idea what's really going on in Iraq with the military. The military, every now and then, a general will complain, and then we hear no more of him. It is not a free and open country, and your question to me originally was what is the fallout, what is the result 5 years later of 9/11? And I'm telling you, we lost the Republic, and they won.
Gore Vidal, thank you very much indeed for talking to us.
Good God. This means that everything, all we have been told since day one, is a pack of lies.
It's all been lies, every part of it.
It means the Taliban in Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11 or any other act of so-called terrorism. It means the people of Afghanistan had nothing to do with 9/11 or any other act of so-called terrorism. It also means that Saddam Hussein had nothing whatsoever to do with 9/11. It means that nearly 2 million innocent unarmed civilians have been murdered, killed and severely injured in Iraq and Afghanistan on false pretenses.
Yes, Bush and Blair even ordered the hospitals and other civilian authorities in Iraq, in the Coalition Provisional Authority, to stop keeping a record of the total number of civilian deaths at the hands of the American and British forces, as can be seen in Chapter 407.
It means the infrastructure of these countries has been bombed back to the Stone Age for no good reason whatsoever. It means their economies have been decimated for absolutely no good reason whatsoever. It means that every single person ever held at Guantanamo, Cuba, is guilty of nothing. They have been held in detention for years for no good reason whatsoever.
David Hicks from Australia was one such detainee. David has recorded every piece of the sordid saga in his autobiography. The Gillard government has sought to gag David to prevent key facts from becoming public knowledge, as well as to prevent David from gaining any income whatsoever from the sale of his book. David Hicks needs to contact the Voice of the World as a matter of urgency. Furthermore, every single person ever held at Guantanamo Bay is due compensation for each and every day of their incarceration. Anyone ever held at Guantanamo needs to contact the Voice of the World as a matter of urgency and without delay. All of the preceding is absolutely correct from every aspect. But of course, this has implications which are far more sinister. Now that we know and can say with all confidence that Osama had nothing to do with 9/11, we don't have to look far to who had the resources and the means to pull it off. If you were one of the people that died on 9/11, wouldn't you want justice to be served upon those responsible? If we now know the truth of who was behind the attacks, don't you think those people should be brought to justice if it is within our power to do so? If you are a surviving family member of someone who died on 9/11, wouldn't you want those responsible brought to account? If you are family of a member of the United States, UK or Australian military killed or badly wounded in Afghanistan or Iraq, wouldn't you want those responsible brought to account? We now know who it was that framed Osama for the event. When they go to so much trouble to pin responsibility for the 9/11 attacks on someone they knew did not do it, logic dictates that those people who have framed Osama for the event, Bush and his administration, are the ones who are responsible for planning and carrying out the attacks. As an example, it is fanciful in the extreme, as alleged by Bush and his administration, that the alleged Osama bin Laden video released to the world in December 2001 just happened to be lying around in some house in Afghanistan for them to just pick up. This videotape was alleged by Bush & Co. to show the guilt of Osama bin Laden for implementing and carrying out the attacks. It was established by the Voice of the World from the outset that this video, every piece of footage, every piece of audio, is a fabrication and a fraud in its entirety. The video was produced by the Film Office of the Pentagon, and it was produced on the orders of George W. Bush and Vice President Richard Cheney. How do we know this video was a fraud? The person in the video is not Osama bin Laden. This was established incontrovertibly by the Ring of Truth, referred to in Chapter 50 of the main chapter index dealing with the creation of the tape in its entirety. General Hamid Gul, former head of the Pakistan Intelligence Agency, the ISI, makes it absolutely clear in this 15th of December 2001 interview with the BBC's Jim Knockerty that the person in the video is not Osama bin Laden. General Gul also states unequivocally in this interview that Afghanistan was not involved in any act of terrorism either in the past or currently.
General Hamid Gul is the former head of Pakistan's military intelligence service, the ISI, a pretty tough character. I asked him this morning if, given the weight of expert analysis, some of which we've just heard, he did accept now that this was guilt. This was bin Laden on the recording.
No, I don't think so. It is because in the past, I think about a month and a half back, a Pakistani journalist was made to travel to Jalalabad and the surrounding area, and he was taken to somebody who he thought was Osama bin Laden, and he interviewed him, and he brought some photographs also. And he wasn't questioned by any of the intelligence agencies. It was quite surprising. I think he appeared on the Larry King live show as well, and he could not answer some of the questions. I think there is an Osama bin Laden look-alike, and that perhaps interview, in that the thrust of the interview was that Osama possesses nuclear as well as chemical, biological weapons. But then later on, the American intelligence themselves said that he doesn't have such weapons.
You suspect there might have been a propaganda purpose?
It is, I think, it's a sort of a high-tech gimmick, and this is because there is a pervasive sense of guilt in America, particularly in the policy-making echelon, that they have really ravaged a nation quite unnecessarily, one which was not involved in any act of terrorism, either in the past or currently.
As a consequence of the preceding, we know that the Pakistan intelligence services, military and government knew that Osama had nothing to do with the 9/11 event, has been entirely innocent of everything Bush, Blair and now Obama have accused him and the so-called organisation Al-Qaeda of, and as a consequence gave him safe haven for all these years. That is why the Pakistani doctor, the CIA collaborator, has just recently been sentenced to 33 years in prison for espionage. The following video clips are particularly revealing, having regard to the above. Note the continued propaganda push for the official line on 9/11, as well as Obama Pentagon fabricated evidence alleging plans by bin Laden to assassinate Obama. You will note that the person in this video, as well as earlier videos, is not Osama bin Laden, but an actor. You will also note the location of the presenter, the Pentagon. Note also how Hillary Clinton is referring to Osama bin Laden as, quote, one of the world's worst mass murderers, end of quote, without the slightest single shred of evidence for making the allegation.
In his own hand, Osama bin Laden in 2010 laid out his plan to kill the President of the United States, saying Obama is the head of infidelity. It was classic bin Laden, still plotting from his isolated hideout.
You know, there's been a lot of talk about Osama bin Laden 1 year after he was killed. But one group of men, the Navy SEALs, who conducted that mission and killed bin Laden, the word is they're never going to talk. Wolf?
Barbara Starr at the Pentagon, thanks.
His help, after all, was instrumental in taking down one of the world's most notorious murderers.
And in a mission that will go down in the annals of intelligence and special operations, some of America's most gifted security professionals tracked down Osama bin Laden after the trail had gone cold. And in one of the most incredibly daring raids, they delivered justice to the architect of a harmful ideology, a hateful ideology, with no place in the modern world, and the man responsible for the deaths of almost 3,000 innocents in our soil.
Bush knew prior to the morning of the 11th September 2001 what was going to happen, who was going to carry out the atrocity, and deliberately remained silent. Bush knew prior to entering the Emma Booker Elementary School in Sarasota, Florida, on the morning of the 11th September, that the first jet had struck the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Bush entered the Emma Booker Elementary School and feigned ignorance and innocence of the events.
Well, Jordan, you're not going to believe what state I was in when I heard about the terrorist attack. I was in Florida. And my chief of staff, Andy Card, well, actually I was in a classroom talking about a reading program that works. And I was sitting outside the classroom waiting to go in, and I saw an airplane hit the tower of a TV. You know, the TV was obviously on, and I used to fly myself, and I said, well, there's one terrible pilot. And it said it must have been a horrible accident. But I was whisked off there. I didn't have much time to think about it. I was sitting in the classroom, and Andy Card, my chief of staff, was sitting over here, walked in and said, a second plane has hit the tower. America's under attack.